Hey there, baseball fans. Tim Lowry with you in a rather impromptu episode of Backfields Media. We are going to have our 2031 season preview. Tonight, we are dealing with the American League. We'll focus on that. I'm going to take a look at everybody. And as you can see on the screen, we've got the predicted standings from the Baseball News Network, part of the Out of the Park. I think we're going to use this as our baseline. Don't agree with everything they say here, but we'll get to it in a minute. Talk about each team. I know it's fun to go all around the world, but for the purposes of this video, I'm going to try to keep it simple. I'm going to start in the American League East, then the Central, then the West. We'll run each division from top to bottom, at least as they're posted here. So let's jump in. We're going to start with the Toronto Blue Jays. The Toronto Blue Jays were ranked 4th in the offseason, according to BNN. Their big pickups were Louis Flores and Ismael Bracamontes. They lost J-Rod Carew in that big trade. This basically cements Trevor Gretzky at center field, although he's currently injured with one of those unknown injury lengths. So it's got to be a little bit of nerve-wracking there for Harris. This is expected to be the best pitching staff in eMLB. And, of course, with Money, Halladay, Barton, a great closer in Martinez, very solid bullpen. You can see all the way up and down the line, this is a team that could be very good on the pitching staff. You have Kyler Murray, who's probably one of the great players in baseball right now. Ed Brown, Bracamontes, Jordan Cage, Porter, who's just a defensive star. This is a very deep, very solid team. They are going to be very tough to beat. Now, BNN, you see predicted them at 108 wins. That's a lot, especially in as competitive a league as this is. I don't see Toronto winning 108. I see them winning closer to 95 to 100. I still see them winning the division. I don't think it's going to be the cakewalk that is predicted here, but this is a really good team. The only question is just how deep into the playoffs will they go? The Toronto Blue Jays will probably win the American League East, according to our prediction here. Now let's move next to the Tampa Bay Rays. Tampa finished 7th in the offseason, and if you're wondering what I'm even talking about here, if you go into the offseason center and you look at offseason summary by team, there you get the list of players. That's the ranking that we're going by here. Toronto picked up 2 huge pitchers in McCleary and Mark Jones, who got them in trades. We're going to scroll down here, you can see. McCleary from Sacramento, Jones from Minnesota, Alberto Soto as a free agent signing. So they definitely went on. You got to beat the team in front of you, right? Toronto had so much good pitching, and so now Tampa's trying to go and compete in that respect. They've got a very solid rotation here. Take a look at them. You've got McClendon, Guerrero, McCleary, Jones, Soto, Tony Gonsolin, who looks like a really good prospect coming up. Offense, more middle of the pack. You've got Pearson and Chestnut and Laron Smith who are going to be good. There's the hope that Alex Murray will have a better season than he did last year. They'd love it if his spring numbers played out as they are right now. Can Laron Smith have a bounce-back season? He's already looks like he's on his way, so looks like it'll be a really good spot there. This was a bit of a surprise team last year. Tampa was not expected to compete. They had that little lull towards the end and then kind of backed into the playoffs, if you remember. They're not going to have the element of surprise this year, but I think they're still going to be very good. This is a team that's going to win 88 to 92 games. You see that Tampa's showing here at 88. That's borderline playoffs. Kind of going back and forth on the fence at Backfields Media whether or not they'll make it. But they are the second team in the American League East, the Tampa Bay Rays. What can you say about the Boston Red Sox? Well, it's not every day that you trade for Livy Dunn to come to Boston. Oh, yeah, and her boyfriend's coming too. Paul Skeens, the big name in that huge trade with Kansas City, and we will talk about the other side of that trade when we get to Kansas City. But it's fair to say that Skeens and Cowgill now for the rest of eMLB's 2.0 history are going to be linked together. But surprisingly, even with this move, Boston only ranked 25th in the offseason rankings, according to Baseball News. Kind of shows you, I don't really think that's that accurate. They lost Danny Diaz. They lost Mike Kennedy. But they've got some huge rotation additions here. If you look at them, as I fumble around, look at their pitching staff here. They got Tommy Springer. They got Mackenzie Gore. And, of course, Paul Skeens. Huge rotation additions. The offense is going to struggle here. Pepe Clark, obviously the best hitter on the team. You've got Douglas and Spencer. But this is a team that is really going to struggle to put runs together. Yeah, this is going to be a bit of a rebuild. The pitching will keep them in games this year. I don't have any doubts about that. But this number of 68, I'm going to be honest with you, that feels high. And I know I have been underwhelmed by Boston before and lived to regret it. I think this is a 60 to 65 win team. They may surprise. If Skeens has a lights out Cy Young kind of year, then possibly. But offense really needs to improve for them to be better. So they are the Boston Red Sox. The New York Yankees made a little bit of news in the offseason. As a matter of fact, if you look, they were the number one team according to WAR gained by this ranking. And it seems like the whole division went pitching heavy. And as you see here, Joe Machado, Jorge Barbosa, Emerson Hancock, Jean-Fran Escalona. They really went in for the pitching depth. And this is a team that just a couple of years ago was in the playoffs. Really fell off of a cliff last year. Now under new management with Brendan, he's got a job to make them into the evil empire again. He went and he bid for and got quite a few of these high-level players. But it's still a work in progress, right? The only real loss they had was Lars Nootbaar, who went to St. Louis. This is a team that's led by Jackson Hedges, Rafi Devers, whether he can play third base or not, Jules Zana, CCP Robert Hassel III. They're building blocks here. The real question is going to be about their depth, if there are any injuries or just, the day-to-day wear and tear that teams go through. The pitching looks strong, but they have a lot of questions too, especially in the bullpen. Anybody else rooting for Doc Luger? I really hope he has a good comeback year. He slowly got it back together last year and can only hope that he gets anywhere close to his previous form. You could say that the Yankees are rebuilding. Almost feels like they're redecorating more so. I mean, because, they'll just whip out the checkbook and get this done. The question is, what kind of moves are they going to make during the trade deadline? How are they going to position themselves in the draft? It's going to be fun to watch this team get built or rebuilt. Now, baseball news puts the Yankees at 68 wins. That feels kind of right. Maybe depending on what moves they make, if any, or if, Hedges has another MVP type season like he had in 2029, they could bump up ahead. But again, work in progress. We will see how well they compete. And the Yankees, wrapping up that preview of them. Now we go to the final team in the American League East, and that is the Baltimore Orioles. They were 16th in the offseason rankings. They went heavy on the outfield, and you can kind of see why in a minute. They went for Victor Robles, Cedric Mullins, and Mike Briggs. And it's because if you look here, the top of their team, at least hitting-wise, it's the infield. Espinoza had a phenomenal season last year. Spence and Bluth have routinely handled the right side of the infield. Just really solid defensively and offensively there in the infield. But overall, the offense is expected to struggle. If you look at the preseason rankings, they're only expected to score 583 runs. And it's because there's a lot of good guys who like drive-in runs sort of players. But this is not an offensive squad that seems to have the ability to string together base hits and walks to put together enough of an offensive threat consistently, game in, game out. Their pitching staff is good. Of course, with everyone else's improvements in the AL East, Baltimore not adding any additional pitching of any note, it's going to make them struggle a little bit, but still, they've got Dan Walker, Greg Newland, who made our top 10 list of pitchers in eMLB. They've got Pablo Lopez, another CCP, and Jacob McKnight. This team could surprise on the mound, but I just don't think they're going to have enough to make a difference day in and day out. They're going to be struggling to score runs, and that's going to really hurt their ability to win ball games. Baseball News puts them at 65 wins. That will be the high side of that. I think with all the offensive talent that's in baseball right now, and with the difficulty it's going to be to compete, even with the decent starting staff they have, I think they're going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 58 to 65 wins. They're going to be competing for a high draft pick, which in a sense helps, but we'll see. The Baltimore Orioles wrap up our review of the AL East. All right. Before we get into the AL Central, you may notice the background behind me. I'm sitting here in the booth at Field of Dreams Park. So just for all of us who are experiencing a winter who kind of wish we were here, thought I'd throw that out here. Let's move along to the AL Central. The Chicago White Sox, when you look at the offseason center for them, they didn't have much of one. They added Hunter Brialt from Portland. And of course, they lost Jorge Barboza, and a few other players. So it was kind of viewed as a less than stellar offseason. But this is the team that is the defending American League champs. And they are a team with a lot of young players, both in the offense and on the mound. So it really wasn't a whole lot of things they needed to do. The Brialt pick was interesting because, just another bullpen piece. And the bullpen seemed to put the White Sox in really good stead this past season. They're expected to be in the top 4 in runs scored. They're projected in ERA to have the second best pitching staff. And just the names. All right, let's take a look at them real quick. You've got Rodriguez, Short, Broccoli, and Staley. That young nucleus all right together, bookended by the veterans in LeBlanc and Serrano. The pitching staff, Abenduct, who's just a phenomenal prospect. You're not going to see him until almost the end of the prospects review. I can promise you that. Ben Lukasiak, I'm sorry if I butchered his name. He's going to be high up on that list too. And they're surrounding Weaver, Roone, and Wilkinson, who were so good last year. There's just so much to love about this team. And with all the dynamic players, and this is going to be a very tough team to beat in the American League. They're posted at 99 wins. That feels about right. Maybe 95 to 99, and not because that they are lesser than what this is projecting, but wins here and there are going to be tough to come by. The whole league is going to be playing playoff games against Chicago all season long. They're going to be circled on everybody's calendar. And that's going to be tough to navigate. And it'll be interesting to see how the White Sox bounce back from almost winning the World Series last year. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I don't see them losing the division, but I see it a lot closer than this 9-game spread here. So the White Sox in the American League Central. Let's move to Cleveland. And as I said, I think this division is going to be a lot closer. So what do I think Cleveland is bringing? Their offseason was not the greatest. They lost Eric Carpenter and 8 others to free agency. They're considered to be middle of the pack if you look at the offense and the defensive numbers overall. But they've got Jeff Colton, who was a runner-up to Lola Thurman as MVP last year. Probably the best leadoff hitter in baseball right now. Certainly one of the best third basemen in baseball. There's Alphonse Elric. There's Slambino. Mike Valentine always seems to play really well. The pitching staff led by Royal and Elvis. Royal actually is the ace of the staff now. If you just look at the overall ranking, I know there's a lot more to it than that. But these two very much up there. You've got Ryan Tecker, who's also a CCP. The bullpen is solid. Ebby LaLouche is going to be phenomenal. The one thing I noticed a lot with this ball club, of course, always good on the defense. You come over here and you look and everything is either aqua or blue. Very few greens and yellows. Extremely good defensive team. But there's a lot of young talent on this club that is close. And so how I see this season playing out for Cleveland is starting out a little bit off, maybe struggling a little bit early on, but then as some of the prospects come in, kind of that mid-season starting to hit, and I really think the second half of the year, they're going to pour it on like the White Sox did last year. And I think it's going to hold Cleveland in really good stead. I see them getting anywhere from 90 to 95 wins. Again, I think the White Sox nip them at the end, but I think Cleveland is going to be a team that definitely competes for a playoff space towards the end because, we still haven't gotten to the AL West. And there are some incredible teams there. So that's Cleveland for 2031. And now we come to the team that has a lot of people talking and asking a ton of questions about, the Kansas City Royals. And I think that one thing everyone wants to know is how can you possibly trade Livy Dunn? What are you thinking? One thing for sure, this will answer the all-time baseball question. What happens when you bring an elite talent to a club that's been struggling for the last few years? How much of a difference does he make? He's going to be powerful. Now you see the hitting profile. Nothing like what we see here in the preseason predictions, where, he's Roy Hobbs, 66 homers, bats 377. I think it's safe to say that projection is not going to hold up very well. The power is very good. This is a player who's going to hit 30, 35 homers. He's got the great speed. It is as a pitcher that he is going to be phenomenal. And I think he's going to be very competitive with the top pitchers in baseball. If you look at the preseason predictions here and you look at Cowgill, he's showing an 18-10, and that's, 264. He's very competitive with William H. Money, Ronson, Bradford, Abinduct, Royal. I mean, it's the who's who of CCPs in the American League on the mound. I think Cowgill is going to be that player. The rest of the team, middle of the pack, offensively, there's a lot of good familiar names. We all know Heimdall's laugh. Clyde Torkel is going to be good. Derek Besko was a nice little pickup in the offseason. If you look at the projections on offense, even with what they were saying Cowgill was going to do originally, still only kind of middle of the pack in terms of runs. I think they could possibly be a little bit better than that. I think some of their CCPs, young, growing up, going to get better. I think Heimdall is going to have a more consistent season. The pitching staff, kind of wondering about. There's a lot of questions behind him and Parker Gooch. Does this 83 wins hold up? Don't think so. I think Kansas City will be a lot better. I think they'll be close to 500, but I feel they're more like a 78 to 81 or 82 win team. This is a team that's on the rise, though. We'll see what kind of moves get made, who comes up in the draft, the farm team. There's a lot of moving pieces here. Let's face it, John Cowgill is going to be the center of this team. He will be the face of the franchise for some time. But this season, it's going to be baby steps. They're going to be competitive. And I think that's going to help Kansas City in terms of fan interest and bringing in more money. That'll be a big help to them. That's Kansas City in the American League Central. Let's move to the Detroit Tigers. Detroit in the offseason, they had the 12th best offseason. They picked up Tyler Dyson from the Athletics, and that was about it. So kind of middle of the road. Didn't make a lot of moves. Didn't lose too many people. They're considered to be towards the bottom of the league offensively. They do have J.R. Frankenstero, who is their best player, hit 304 last year, 27 homers. Donald LaFay hitting cleanup right now, a little injured. We'll see how that goes. He's had 2 really good seasons with the club. Hank Peralta, the third best player, he's coming into his own as well. But much like Boston, they don't have a lot of the connective pieces, that guy that can get you from first to third so that, Frankenstero and LaFay can drive you in. Mason Wynn made the top 10 in our DHs list, if you remember, all the way back when we started that. But it's the bottom of the lineup that really struggles. And it's just a building game, right? They do have 3 CCPs in the rotation. Goat Yoga there, Giannis Garbo. Musa von Vandenberg, who's kind of one of my personal favorites. I really like him from years of doing the CCP festival. And John Snow, who could be possibly overmatched here. Maybe he's not going to start the year in the eMLB, but he's a prospect for the future. There's some good names, there's some familiar names, and there's the potential here for a lot of struggling. I think the lack of offense is really going to hurt Detroit overall as the season progresses. I don't think the pitching is going to be as bad. If you look at what the preseason predictions say, they have them giving up 821 runs. They're going to have a hard time doing that. I think the pitching is better than that, especially when you see the number of strikeouts. However, I think this is a team that is going to win between 70 and 75 games. So I think they're positioned correctly. I think the offense is going to hold them back. Looking forward to see how the future Tigers do in terms of the draft, things like that. That's going to be fun to watch that rebuild. So let's wrap up our AL Central review with a look at the Minnesota Twins. The Twins added a couple of big names in the offseason. They added Kent Herbeck Jr., who is lights out, is the best player on the team. Aeschylus Dudley has come in. He's a CCP, played the last few years in Tampa. He's a good player. Xavier Odom was locked into a long-term deal. He's going to have a long future. Juan Ledesma, also a good hitter, more of a hitter for average as opposed to homers. In fact, this team offensively is expected to be next to last in the American League in home runs. Their best pitching, if you look at it, they tend to be relievers, and even they are slightly above average if you go by the overall ranking. What this feels like to me is a ton of role players. This is a team of them. And we watched last year as Aaron took this team with those pieces and parts and made a very competitive squad out of them. And I think a few of the deals that were made disrupted that, just kind of threw a few parts out of the engine, if you will. And with a team where everybody has a calculated role, and I keep thinking back to the in real life Tampa Bay Rays, the Twins kind of fit that mold. And I think that little bit of shift is going to really hurt them. I think Herbeck's going to have a great year. I kind of feel like he's going to be on his own a little bit. Odom might help, but we will see. They are projected in the preseason prediction as 68 and 94. That pitching, that 850, I don't think that's high enough. I think they're going to allow a few more runs than that. This team is going to be competing for the first draft pick overall. I see this team winning only about 55 to 62 wins. If they don't lose 100, I think it'll be a really good year for them. And as someone who has run a team for years whose goal was not to lose triple digits, I know how much that hurts. But the Twins are in a rebuild, and it'll be curious to see when their new GM comes in just how they will do. And now we come to probably one of the toughest divisions in baseball, certainly in the top three. Used to be four, maybe again soon, and that is the American League West. The American League West, we're going to start with the Houston Astros. I think this is hilarious. So if you look at the offseason center, summary by team, you go all the way down to the bottom. There's Houston with a -12 WAR. And of course, justified because they lost Joel Machado, Kenny Rodriguez. There's your 12 right there. They did get Shamar Hosky late as a free agent signing. They made one trade for Bill Wirtz, who was a center fielder in Colorado. More of a hitter as opposed to a fielder, but more on that later. They did lose a lot of pitching as well. And yet, when you look at the preseason prediction, despite all of those losses, there's Houston in their traditional 99 wins and top of the division. Which is it? Well, this still projects to be the third best offense and the fourth in runs allowed in the American League. So on both sides of the ball, extremely competitive, very dominant. A couple of questions, though. Despite having Yordan Alvarez, Sammy Isla, Hosky potentially offsetting some of the lost runs from K-Rod, my big question for Houston is, does Grayson Rowan come back? This is a guy who was hitting 290, 300, fell off a lot offensively last year. You see the ratings struggling a little bit, above average overall, but certainly not at the peak levels he was a couple of years ago. If he can come back, oh, absolutely. This is a team that's going to win 99 games. But I don't know. It's the one big question I have about them. This is a great team. Don't get me wrong. If you look at the pitching staff, you've got the Bradfords at the top. There's a lot of depth here. If you look at the pitchers, like who they're using as starters, Derek Waters is a CCP. It's going to be very good in the next few years. He's only 22. The bullpen has incredible depth behind Bradford. This is a very deep, very talented team. However, just the sheer amount of competition and Houston having lost quite a bit of pieces last year, I don't doubt Ben. I know he can put this team together. It's how is everybody else going to adjust? I think they're going to be very much in the thick of it. I think there's going to be a few struggles early as this team kind of gets to know each other and puts their offense together. Then I think in the second half of the year, they kind of pick up. This is a team, though, that's going to win 90 to 95 games as opposed to 99. Again, if Rowan comes back full strength, all bets are off. But that's kind of where I see Houston right now. Moving on to the Angels. The Angels had the 11th rated off season. Not much happened, really. Their one signing of note was third baseman Luis Victoriano Garcia. Always mess that up. Decent player, 3 WAR. Only spent $8 million for him. He's a good pickup. Decent and could be even better at third base as he improves. He's not going to grow a whole lot more. He's at his age 30, so what you see is what you get. But a high work ethic guy. He's really good. They're expected to be the third best offense in all of eMLB, and I'm not surprised. Sean Thornton, as I said in the first base review for the top 10, he could very easily have a triple crown season, similar to the way Lola Thornton played last year. Just phenomenal all-around player and one of the best in eMLB. Tom Kazansky, was it top 10 in like 9 separate categories in the American League in eMLB last year. Leadoff hitter Barry Allen, who still can hit 25 to 30 homers a year. This is a great offensive team. The pitching, you've got the 1-2 punch of Ronson and Jim. You've got a decent, if not spectacular, bullpen with a lot of moving parts. And, of course, Rob Rasmussen, who's getting starting time in spring training, but he's typically a closer or a late innings, high leverage guy. Let's put it that way. There's a lot to like about this team. They didn't lose as much as Houston did, and so I think that makes them competitive. I also think that watching – I don't think Out of the Park works this way, but in my mind, just the motivation of watching Mike Trout catch Aaron and Aaron and Bonds for the home run all time. I just picture them kind of getting a little stimulus from that, but that's just me. They're expected to win 99 games as well. Maybe. I don't see it. I think they're going to win around 95. I think they're going to be very close with Houston. I think they're going to be very competitive. These two teams are going to be right neck and neck with each other. Now, where do all those extra wins go? I think this is the big story coming in 2031 with the Texas Rangers. There's always one team in baseball who enters the season on a mission, and I think this is the team this year. Now, we'll talk about Philly in our next video about the National League. But I think Texas is the team on a mission. They were 1 game short of the World Series last year, lost in Game 7. They brought in Justin Sharp. They did lose Barrios to free agency. They traded Chad Cuff to Milwaukee. Parkerson went to Pittsburgh. But this is a team that had a lot of tools, and they kind of had some room to play with. Bill McClure, the best reliever in baseball, basically was Parkerson last year. Mike Haggard is good. And look at this offense. Trainer, Lee, Guerrero, Thurman. Thurman's the MVP. Right now, the best player in baseball, beyond a shadow of a doubt. C.J. Abrams, going to get a lot of time. My one question is, can Yasiel Pino get back to the 45 to 50 homers? Get that average back above 200, start slugging over 500 again? That's going to be a real question here. But I think this is going to be a very driven team. They have unfinished business. They've also made some moves. You see this guy. He's going to be in the majors sooner rather than later, I feel. Was part of that Cuff trade. He's been around the league already, but I think he may have found a home in Texas. This is going to be a really good team. Now, where do they fit in the preseason prediction? We have these two around 95. I feel that Texas could be too. I feel like they're in the 92 to 97 range. I think all three of these teams compete against each other when it comes down to it. Spoiler alert, I think all three make the playoffs. So that's our top three for the American League West. Another team that kind of surprised me with some of the numbers that they had here, the Seattle Mariners. In the American League West, they had the 10th rated offseason. They were busy in the free agent market. They signed Connor Thomas, Andre Palante, who I learned to like a lot in Arizona. They signed Aaron Judge. This is not considered a great offense. They are in the bottom third. They're in the top of the bottom third of the league. Wallach, and as a matter of fact, let's look at it this way. Scroll up a little bit. Wallach and Bond are the two leaders on offense. There's this guy, Eric Kelly, who's right there behind them. CCP fan favorite of the festival, Cecil Cantrell. This is a good line. It's good players, but it drops off significantly. And the projections have them not scoring a whole lot of runs because of that. The pitching, on the other hand, Baseball News Network has them as the third best staff in the American League, led by Grumpy Old, Cantrell, Champ Bell. There's some depth here. Palante is a good pitcher. I mean, you look at his ERA the last 2 years in what had to be a very bad ballpark for him in Chevy Chase Field. He's going to do well here, I think, in Seattle. Ricky Vaughn still there. I think this is a very high depth team. I think this is going to be good. If you look at the preseason predictions, they are only projected to have 450 walks. And that ties with Kansas City. Houston's right up there too. Pitching coach Bob Ariat clearly preaches no walks. Things are heading back up for Seattle. They had a couple of years. They didn't have to quite completely tear it down, although they did move some big pieces. But I feel like now they are projected to win 84 games. I feel like that's close. They're definitely a 500 at least team. So I think they're on the way back up. The pitching is going to do them the most benefit. If their offensive stars can put things together and you can find that fourth or fifth guy to have a really good season, I think that's going to play a huge role there. Seattle Mariners in the American League West. Now we come to the Portland Stags. They lost a bit of pitching due to free agency and other things. This is going to be a fun team to watch, though. You look at their lineup and you look at the speed. And, I mean, I'm halfway down the page and I'm still – I mean, you know, above the fold, everybody's at least a 60 in speed. This team runs and runs a lot. Dominic Aguilera runs a lot. Anthony Volpe is fast. Kalenic is fast. This is a team that makes it miserable for a pitcher and for the opposing defense when they get runners on base. They're expected to lead all of eMLB in stolen bases, and it's not close. Their star right now, Dominic Aguilera. He is the linchpin of that team. Their star to come, this guy, Johnny Motri. He's learning his craft. He will be up sooner rather than later if he doesn't break camp with the big club. He's got a huge future ahead of him. Portland's got some bright, sunny days ahead. Their pitching's in the bottom third, but they're in the top of the bottom third. I know. Vito Romero is their best starter. They've got a few CCPs, Ryan Shaw, Ika Knock. There's Carpenter. Up in they've got some depth. And just like any other expansion team, working through the draft, working through the farm system, trying to build some higher level talent, kind of where you would expect. They've done a really good job here. Jeremy Frank sitting in Portland. Be nice for him to have one more great run, I think, before it's over with. I hope he does well. Shane Bieber there as well. The future, I think, is what Portland is looking at here. They are projected 59 wins, 103 losses. Feels about right. I feel like the speed is going to kind of get them a couple of extra wins, maybe 62, 63. They'll be in contention to not lose 100, and I think that would be huge for them as well. All right. Our one last team in the American League, and it is the Sacramento Athletics. Oh, if this was only real life 2025 eMLB. What do I mean by that? You've got Kyle Tucker. You've got Ozzie Albies. You've got Ellie De La Cruz. Oh, this would be so good. Cody has a rebuild on his hands, and I think he is excited for the challenge, and he's in for one. Tim Lane is his best player on both sides, both as a starter here, as you see, and as a hitter. Got tremendous power as a hitter. Going to be interesting to see. He's got a little bit of experience handling great two-way players. So we'll see how Lane does with this team. And he's only 23. That's just insane. It'd be so cool to watch him. There's a lot more to come with this ball club, just not this year. Cody's made it very clear he's got a plan. He's willing to go low budget. He built Pittsburgh from the ground up. He's going to try it here. This would be a phenomenal effort if he was able to pull that off. This year, he's going to be competitive for a high draft pick. I'm also going to be watching them excitedly, watching the file all the time. You know that there are deals coming. You know that there are moves. It's Cody. 54 and 108, that feels like about right for them. So let's sum it up and let's talk playoffs. Who do I think makes the playoffs? I've already told you Houston, Los Angeles, and Texas make it. The White Sox clearly win their division, and so does Toronto. That leaves one. Why does Alexa talk to me right now? Doesn't she see I'm doing work? Anyway, we're up to, there are two teams fighting for that sixth spot, in my mind. The Tampa Bay Rays and the Cleveland Guardians. It's coin flip. Cleveland's superior defense, I think, nips ahead of Tampa at the wire. It's going to be close. It may even be tied at the end. And I know Out of the Park doesn't do playoffs anymore at the end for tied teams, but it would be so cool to see that. I think Cleveland nips in for the playoffs. I think both Chicago and Texas win. I think Texas wins their wild card round games. I think Houston beats the Angels. I think Texas beats Toronto. And I think Chicago beats Houston. It sets up a rematch between Chicago and Texas for the American League crown once again. And that's where I'm going to leave it. I got to save something for the end of the last episode so we can talk the Final Four. This has been your American League preview. You had a guest appearance by my lovely assistant. And I hope you enjoy the 2031 eMLB season. The American League is going to have a lot to look forward to. Who are the great players going to be? You look at these MVP and Cy Young Award list potentials here. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say Kyler Murray is going to win the American League MVP. And I'm having a hard time betting against Ben Avenduct, but then there's my buddy Martin Bradford there too. I really don't know. I hope it's all as close as these numbers and ratings show. Hope you enjoyed this. Like and follow in the comments, and leave your thoughts in the Discord. Tell me where I'm wrong. Ben, tell me why I'm wrong to not think you're going to win it. Same for you, Billy. We'll see you soon with the National League preview. Going to do it pretty much just in this same style. And then we'll have a little add-on at the end of the National League talking about the League Championship Series and ultimately who will win the 2031 World Series. Until then, for Backfields Media, I am Tim Lowry, hoping you have a great day.